Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is doing well. If you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe to see more videos about Python programming. In this tutorial, I'll be building a weather API using the Django REST framework. I will try to keep this tutorial simple by using the read-only model view set to build the API. My interpretation of a REST API is a way of manipulating objects in a database. To keep things simple, we're only going to be reading items stored in the database. I'm going to create the project using Github so that it will be easy for me to share. The first thing I'm going to do is give my project a name and a description. This repo will be public and I want to initialize it with a README file. Add a Python gitignore file and select an MIT license. Then hit Create Repository. Open the terminal in Mac or the command prompt in Windows and navigate to the directory where you want to clone this project. Use the command git clone followed by the URL of the repo that you just created. Open your preferred IDE and drag the project folder into the IDE. This usually takes about a minute or less to set up the workspace. I prefer to use PyCharm because it was built for Python. We're going to use a virtual environment. A virtual environment allows you to isolate libraries and scripts in one virtual environment from another or even the rest of the computer. This way, updating certain libraries or scripts will not affect the libraries or scripts in another environment. We can create the virtual environment by typing this command in the terminal: python 3-m-venv.env, where .env is the name of my virtual environment, and the dot prefix indicates that it is a hidden file. To activate the virtual environment, type source.env/bin/activate if you are on a Mac. If you are on Windows, the command will be .env/scripts/activate. You'll know that you are successful if you see the name of your virtual environment in parentheses. With the virtual environment set up, we can install Django by typing the command pip install Django. This usually takes a few minutes. When it finishes, run the command pip install Django REST framework. Installing Markdown is optional. You can install it by running pip install Markdown. I use this package for syntax highlighting. When this finishes, we will have to configure the IDE. If you're using VS Code, you can skip this step. Click on Preferences. This may be Settings on a Windows PC. Then go to Project and select Python Interpreter. Click the cogwheel in the upper right corner and select Add and make sure the version of Python is the one from the virtual environment. This may take a while to load, but it shows you all the packages that you have installed. Apply the changes and click OK. Return to the terminal and create a project by typing Django-admin start project Met Office. I'm going to name it Met Office, and the name is going to be followed by a period so that the project folder will be placed in the root folder. If you refresh the folder on the left, you should be able to see the project files. A Django project can be made up of many different apps. To create an app, we use the command python manage.py start app followed by the app name. I'm going to name this app Weather API. This adds a folder named Weather API containing files to our project. The project folder contains a file named settings.py. Open this file and scroll to the section which says Installed Apps. We need to add Django REST Framework and the name of the app we created earlier to the list of installed apps. One of the cool things about PyCharm is that all the files are saved automatically, so you don't have to hit save before running your code. When you're finished, open models.py from the app folder. We create a model that represents the items that we want to store in the database. Django class names should be singular. We will need to inherit from models.model. A docstring can be added to describe the items that will be stored in the database. I'm going to create a tuple of tuples and name it descriptions. Because this is a constant, it should be capitalized. 0 will represent sunny, 1 will represent rain, 3 will represent cloudy, and 4 will represent snow. Add an attribute named description and set this to models.integer field and set the choices to descriptions and set the default to 0 because it's sunny in Barbados 90% of the time. Add an attribute to represent when the description was created and set it to models.datetime field and set auto now add to true. Create an attribute for temperature and set it to models.float field because we want to record the temperature using floating point values. Adding a meta class allows us to order the items in the database. We can order them using the date they were created on. The dash prefix will sort the dates in descending order, and if it's removed, it will sort the dates in ascending order. Run the command python manage.py make migrations weather API. Including the name of the app allows you to run this command for a specific app. Remember that Python projects can contain multiple apps. The purpose of this command is to write the SQL statements that will generate the database tables. Running python manage.py migrate will generate the database table. Anytime you make changes to the model, such as adding or removing attributes, you would have to run these two commands. Open admin.py and import our model. We need to register the model so that we will be able to see it in the admin panel. You can do this by typing admin.site.register and pass the name of the model. To log into the admin panel, we need to create a superuser. A superuser is like an administrator. Run python manage.py, create superuser in the terminal. The username defaults to the username of the computer. You can leave it blank or change it. You need to enter an email and a password. A password that is too short will prompt Django to ask you if you want to bypass validation. Click yes, and this will create the superuser. We can run the development server by typing python manage.py run server. Log into the admin panel by using the credentials that you created earlier. Click Add to create a new description. Enter a value for the temperature and click Save. We have a slight problem here. The human readable representation of this object is description object, and this doesn't tell us much about the object. Clicking on it will show you the attributes, but it's still confusing. We're going to use one of Django's built-in functions in models.py that returns a string representation of the object that we just created. This function will return self.createdOn. It's not necessary to run make migrations or migrate because we are not making any changes to the database. If we refresh the page, we get an error. From reading the error message, the function that we just added is returning a datetime type when it should be returning a string, so we need to convert the datetime type to a string. To convert the datetime type, all we have to do is cast it to a string. If we refresh the page and click on Descriptions, we should be able to see the date the description was created, which replaces the description object we saw before. Clicking on the object will still show us the attributes. It is a good practice to use Git when building projects. It allows you to track changes and re-roll to previous versions in case something went wrong. Type git add space period. Ensure that there's a space between add and the period. Type git commit -am followed by a commit message in quotation marks. For this commit message, I'm going to type added model and created a superuser. When you're finished with the commit message, type git push origin. If we explore the GitHub page, we should be able to see all the code that we have written so far. Create a Python file named serializers in the app folder. The purpose of the serializer is to take the data, such as query sets and model instances, and convert it to a native Python data type, and then render it as JSON or XML. We need to import the serializers class from the REST framework, and we also need to import the model. We need to leave 2 lines before the class declaration as per PEP 8 guidelines. PEP stands for Python Enhancement Proposal, and its purpose is to improve the readability and consistency of Python code. There are different types of serializers, and the model serializer closely maps to the Django model definitions. The model serializer class will automatically generate a set of fields based on the model. It will also generate validators, and it includes simple implementations of create and update. We need to define a meta class, and in it we specify the model and also specify the fields that we want exposed. As you add instances to the database, each instance has a unique ID. The fields that we want exposed are the ID, the weather description, the temperature, and created on. Open views.py and import view sets from the REST framework. Import the serializer that we just created and the model. A viewSet class is a class-based view that doesn't provide method handlers such as get or post. Instead, it provides actions such as list and retrieve. There are more actions such as create, update, partial update, and destroy, but we're going to use the read-only model viewSet, and this is limited to list and retrieve. Our class is going to inherit from viewsets.readOnly model viewSet. We need to provide a querySet attribute, which we will set to description.objects.all. A querySet represents a collection of objects in our database, and it is somewhat related to a select statement in SQL databases. We need to specify the serializer class that we want to use. We need to create a file in the app folder. Name it urls.py. This file will tell your app what it should show a user who opens a specific URL. Import path and include from Django.urls. The path method is used for routing URLs to the appropriate view functions within a Django application. The include method adds URLs from the app's directory URLs to the project URLs. We need to import the views module from Weather API. This is how you would import a module from a project with multiple apps. Import default router from REST framework.routers. The router contains routes for the standard set of actions. The default router includes a default API route view that returns a response containing hyperlinks to all the list views. Create a variable named router and use it to store default router. Call the register method on the router, and the first argument is the URL prefix to use for this set of routes, and the second argument is the viewSet class. You may also supply a base name, but this is optional. Base name is only necessary when the viewSet doesn't contain a query set. URL patterns is a list of Django.url.path instances. Django runs through each of the URL patterns, and it stops at the first one that matches the requested URL. The first argument in the path function is a string which specifies the URL endpoint. An empty string specifies the root of our app. We need to include routers.urls so that Django can search for URL patterns in this location. Open the project urls.py file and expand the import statement. We need to import the include method from Django.urls. In the path method, we want to add a blank string as the first argument, and we want to include URLs from the app that we created. The base URLs for your site are in the project URLs folder. You then forward requests made on a certain route to your app's urls.py using the include method. Run the server by typing python manage.py run server in the terminal. The API that we created is up and running. This is the default basic root view for default router. If we click on descriptions, we should be able to see the entries in the database. If we had used a different model view set, there would be some additional buttons that would allow us to write to the database. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up or hit subscribe to see more programming tutorials. Thank you for watching.